Hey everyone, welcome back to the latest GoSkills Excel Challenge solution. How close did you get to solving it? Well, we've got Microsoft trainer Deborah Ashby ready to share her solution. Check it out right now.
So let me show you how I solved this challenge. The first thing I asked you to do was to tidy up this data. Our coffee data is a little bit of a mess. We can see it's all contained within column B, and there's a lot of erroneous spaces and things we really need to tidy up before we can analyze this data. And I asked you to use Power Query in order to do this. So let's click in the data. We're going to jump up to the Data tab, and then in the Get and Transform Data group, we're going to choose from Table or Range. We're going to say, yes, my table has headers. Let's click on OK to open the Power Query editor. And what we should find is that when this data imports in, again, it's all in one big long column. But now we have access to all of Power Query's utilities within the editor to tidy this data up. Now let's deal with the most obvious and easiest thing first of all, and that is row 1. That's a row we don't really need. So we can go to Remove Rows. We can say Remove Top Rows, and I want to remove just the first row. So we're going to type in a 1 and click on OK just to get rid of that. So that looks a little bit better. That was the most obvious thing to do first. The next thing we need to do is break up this data into separate columns. And if you immediately reach for the split column option, then you would be right, but you might have discovered a problem. If we were to say here split by delimiter and then choose custom, and we could enter in the pipe symbol, which is effectively what our delimiter is here. If we do this, it will work for the actual columns of data, but it doesn't work for that header row up there. So a way to get around this, I'm just going to backtrack a little bit, is to demote the heading row and make it just a regular row in the table, and then we can split up the data. So let's go to Use Headers as First Row. That will demote them down, and now when we go to Split Column, we can choose by delimiter. We want custom, we want our little pipe symbol in there, and when we click on OK, we should find that it splits it correctly then. Let's carry on tidying up our data. I can see we have an empty column here. We can right click and remove it. And let's just scroll across to see if we have any other empty columns. Yes, we do. Let's right click and remove that column as well. Now I'm going to keep the heading row as a regular row in the table for the time being because I want to apply a trim to all of the data in order to remove these erroneous spaces. And the spaces are very obvious. If you take a look in this column just here where we have product name, you can see we have a whole bunch of space just before. And we have a similar thing throughout our data. So we're going to select the first column, we're going to hold down Shift and select the last column, and then on the Transform tab, we can go to Format and we can choose the Trim option. And this is very similar to using the Trim function within Excel. So our data's looking pretty good. I'm now going to promote the headers back up to the heading row. So once again, Home tab, use first row as headers. And check it out, that is looking so much better. The other thing I asked you to do was check to make sure that we have the right data type selected. And we can do that simply by clicking on the corner icon just here and choosing the type of data that we have in this column. Now this is saying whole number. I'm okay with that. That's a product number. Product name is text. That's correct. Size is text. Quantity, we want that to be a decimal number. Price is currency and total is currency as well. So just make sure that you checked all of those. So we now have a completely tidy data set and we can load it back into Excel as a table. So from the Home tab, we're going to go to Close and Load. And what that will basically do is create a brand new tab in our workbook with that tidied data loaded into an Excel table. So I'm just going to move this worksheet, the other side of coffee sales, and I'm going to rename this to, I'm just going to call it Clean Data. Now another thing here, sometimes even though you've set these as currency data types, they don't really display too well. So I'm going to go back and I'm just going to add accounting format. So now that we have our clean data, we can create our pivot table. So I'm going to click in the data. There's a couple of ways you can do this. You can go to the Insert tab and choose Pivot Table, or you can go to the Table Design tab and Summarize with Pivot Table. I'm going to put this onto a new worksheet. That is fine. Let's click on OK. And I wanted you to summarize your pivot table by the product name. We're going to drag that down into rows. And the total, we're going to put that into values. Let's rename our row label. I'm going to double click and change this to item type. And let's apply some number formatting because these numbers don't look very consistent. We're going to right click, go to number format. Let's choose accounting and 2 decimal places and click on OK. Something else I also did was I changed the design that I'm using, the pivot table style. So if we click the drop down, I actually used one of these darker styles, and it was this one just here, brown pivot style dark 3. And I turned on banded rows just to make it a little bit easier to read. The next thing I asked you to do was to insert a slicer so that we can filter our data by coffee size. So let's click in the pivot table again, up to pivot table analyze, and we're going to choose insert slicer. We want to filter by size. Let's click on OK. And this is the default slicer that you get. And if you remember in the example, I actually have mine running horizontally as opposed to vertically. So if we go up to the slicer ribbon, where we have columns, currently that says 1. Now I'm going to take that up to 3, and that will effectively give me that horizontal slicer. We can do a little bit of resizing, and I'm also going to change the slicer style so it matches, so that it's a nice orange color. I also asked you to turn off the slicer heading. So where it says size just here and where we have these icons, that's a simple case of right clicking on the slicer, going into slicer settings, and just turning off display header and click on OK. So immediately that slicer looks a lot cleaner. Let's position it above. So I'm just going to drag down row 2, and then we can move this into position. The final thing I asked you to do was to add a calculated field that shows this data when 20% tax has been added. Now we don't have the tax amount or any tax totals in our source data, so we can add these using a calculated field. So let's jump up to Pivot Table Analyze, go into Fields, Items and Sets and choose Calculated Field. So I'm going to call this, let's just call this plus tax. And then in brackets, we'll say 20%. And our formula is effectively just the total multiplied by 20% plus the total again. If we don't plus the total again, we're just going to have the 20% tax amount as opposed to the total plus the tax. So the calculation we're going to do here is we're going to say total multiplied by 20% plus total. Remember, when you're using calculated fields, your calculation is done using the fields of the pivot table as opposed to things like cell references. Let's click on OK, and it's going to add that in. I'm going to change the title here. So we just want this to say plus tax. Let's click on OK, and there we go. The final thing I'm going to do is sort this so that we have the largest number at the top. So let's right click, go to sort and sort largest to smallest. And now let's check our slicer works. It does. We have our tax amounts. And if you think about the data that we started with, this is a pretty good analysis. And that's how we solved this challenge. Tell us what you think about our solution to this challenge by commenting below or joining the conversation on our Slack channel. That's all for now, and I will see you next time.
So there it is. Did you get the same results? Did you use the same approach? Or did you try something different? We'd like to know. Share your take on the challenge in the comments below or join us for more discussion in our Slack channel. Link in the description. Thanks for participating, and make sure to subscribe to this channel to get an alert when the next challenge is released. We'll see you then.